Welcome to Sister Friends. I'm Angie Gray here with my amazing friend,
ReShonda Young.
and together we're diving into what's at the heart of it all, relationships.
From finances and family to the ups and downs of life partnerships, and even those relationships we have with ourselves, we're here to talk about the real stuff.
We're not shying away from the hard conversations, we're leaning into them because we believe that when we start talking, we start understanding.
And when we understand, we grow in empathy, compassion, and connection.
So grab a seat,
Grab a friend, and let's
get into it.
Okay,
If you do that, hey, dude, he is super in chords as of like the last 4 days. We do not know why. He finds a chord and he wants to have a good time. So you're going to have to go outside. All right, buddy, I got to let you go outside. Okay, come here. Come here. I know it's cold out, my little guy. I know.
Poor guy. Looks like not without me.
Yeah, not you.
So should we
Okay.
maybe... Yeah.
Oh, dear. Hi, no, I'm not going to let you out. Go lay down. Go on. Okay. All right, ready, set, go. Did that make sense, what I just said?
Yeah.
Wait, should we start again? Did I make sense?
it
All
made
right, we're going to
sense.
start
Oh,
again.
gosh.
Oh, my gosh, I'm sorry. Hello.
Hi, Sonny. Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Angie Gray.
And I'm ReShonda Young.
And we are Sister Friends. Thanks so much for being with us. Today is Martin Luther King Day, and it's very cool because yesterday, ReShonda gave a keynote in our community called Achieving the Dream Against All Odds, which is super cool. And so it's my honor today to have you sort of recap that because the messaging when you shared with me the other day about what we were going to be talking about is so important, and to be able to talk to someone in person about their real life experiences and to honor Martin Luther King today is pretty perfect. So that's what we're going to do. So, I guess just...
And so this actually may be a little different than the keynote for those who were there. So just getting a little bit more in depth than the 30 minutes that I have on stage. So.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, tell me why, first of all, maybe a cool question might be why the title? Why this title?
So this was actually come up with by LaTanya Graves, who is the president of the local NAACP. She's the one who puts on the banquet each year.
Oh, okay.
So she chose that title, and it's like,
Very cool.
That's great.
Was that not hard to go, okay, I know exactly what I can say?
It actually made it difficult to think about what to say in 30 minutes. For someone who's really brief, you think, 30 minutes.
That's the opposite for me. Like, that's usually hard.
I'm usually a pretty brief person to the point. But I also kind of enjoy telling true stories. Yeah. Telling stories so people can hopefully feel like they were part of, or they can get the emotions of what happened.
Yeah.
So
All right. Well, I'm really excited. Some of the stuff you were sharing with me the other day. So where's best to begin?
So I think, being that, it's Martin Luther King Day, when people are getting a chance to first hear this, really just the honoring of how brave he was. And I remember being in my late 30s and thinking about the fact that his life ended at 39. He always seems so much older, when you think of all that he did and the hope that he brought to people. 39 years old?
Yeah.
I mean, that is so young.
Yeah. He did. He seemed very wise.
He
quiet, but just very, discerning. And I mean, at least from what we saw,
Right. Yeah. I mean, you just think and all of the people, he didn't have social media back then. And all of the people who were following him because of the message that he was sharing. And that message literally, even back then, was going across the world. It's
What a trip to think
amazing.
about that. Like the effort that people had to go through to follow. Like now following is so different, right? It can
Right.
at our fingertips, but the effort that people had to go through to the commitment to that message, and
Yeah.
was able to get
Right.
the whole world's attention without a cell phone,
Right. Without
you
a cell
know,
phone. Yeah.
it's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I think about when you were saying, I thought you were going down that road of the people that helped him do that too. Like there's been
Yeah.
some pretty good movies that I think have done a really good job
Yeah.
of just showing the courage of the people that helped him do the things that he did, his
For
marketing
sure.
team, like, wow.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the way that the grassroots mobilization
Yes.
was incredible.
Yeah.
So just the dreams that he had that truly have come to fruition in my generation and even with my mom's generation. So he was older than my mom. He would have been closer to my grandparents' age.
Mm-hmm.
But just knowing how they had a TV early on. My grandmother, I say she was one of the best providers ever. Coming from having so little, she was so smart and so wise, and she was just the greatest provider. And that's to take nothing away from my grandfather,
Mm-hmm.
but my grandmother she was it.
She was a bomb.
She was, yeah. So even when they were in Mississippi, in the Jim Crow era of Mississippi, living on a plantation, she was one of the first to buy a TV so that they could keep up with what was going on. And I remember growing up and her keeping us grandkids and the news. I don't remember not watching the news. I don't remember not knowing who the
That's
news
where,
anchors were.
yes, that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Like, when you were little, do you remember the messaging of Martin Luther King? Like, through your grandmother, what did they talk about? How did it influence your family? How did it affect you personally, like here?
Yeah, so maybe I'll go into a little bit of how my family came here.
Okay.
So my mom, this is my mom's side of the family that I'm talking about. Both my mom and my dad grew up in Mississippi, Jim Crow,
Yeah.
cotton fields, all the things that you see on TV that I think a lot of times people look at and think, oh, that was so long ago.
Yep.
It's like, yeah, no, that was my mom. That was my mom. That was my grandmother. That was
Yeah.
my family that they're still living, not my grandmother, but, my mom and my aunts and uncles who endured all of that. So it wasn't long ago. And it had such a lasting impact that I think a lot of times we don't think about. We talk about trauma and we talk about relationships, but sometimes we don't really think about how that has a lasting effect. So on my mom's side of the family, my mom, she talks about how when they were growing up, first, my grandmother was only able to go to school through sixth grade. And then beyond that, she had to be in, the cotton fields. And
So can I ask, like, the year, just to give my small brain like a time, like what year are we talking?
So my grandmother was born in 1918. My mother was born in 1945.
Okay.
The family moved to Iowa in 1965.
Okay.
So my grandmother was mid 40s. She was about my age.
Okay. When this is happening, that you're telling this story.
When they moved.
When they
moved.
Right.
Yeah, to Iowa.
Okay.
So
So we're in, like, if she's in, like, working in the fields, and this was somewhere probably in the 1920s.
She would have been right, but
Okay.
20s to 1965.
That whole time.
Yeah.
Until you guys moved here.
Until they moved here.
And she was how old? You said she was in her 40s?
She was in her 40s.
So sixth grade.
Sixth grade, she was.
Till she was in her 40s.
Oh, no.
I'm
They
so
started
sorry.
working before sixth grade. She was only able to continue through school until sixth grade. And then there was no more. So that would have been, sixth grade would have been around 1930. And from there, 12 years old or so,
Yeah.
she's working. And even with school, they were only able to go from like October until maybe March or April, depending on the weather. They weren't able to go a full school year. That was not just my grandmother, but that was my mom and my aunts and uncles as well. They weren't able to go for a full school year. And so, like I said, my grandmother, sixth grade education, one of the smartest people. Like when I was younger, I'm like, gosh, she is so smart. Yeah. So that was always amazing to me. And so my mom, she talked about how they would listen to Martin Luther King on the radio and some of his speeches, and that was something they'd sit around, the radio and they listen to it. Yeah. And inspiring, but also it could be scary. It could be very scary.
Yeah.
Those were the days where, if there was a black man who did something that the white plantation owners did not like, they might go and see him hanging in a tree. God, what? Or taking them up to the store, the local store, and taking them into a back room and beating them. That was what
this is what your grandmother and her family lived
and
through.
my mother
and your mother when she was little.
She moved up here when she was 20. So, when she was still, Daniel and Sunshine's age, pretty much, she's still, that was life.
That was like her formative years
It was her formative years. And my mom also was always so smart, but I think the conditioning, she always had in her mind of she wasn't smart enough because she didn't go to the white school, the
conditioning.
I remember being around third grade, and my mom, and nothing to discount maids at all. Actually, I have a great amount of respect for people who do like maid type of work, because that's what my mom did until she was 50 and ended up coming out on disability
here in our community. Oh wow.
Yeah, and
hardest work ever.
Hardest work. And so I would sometimes after school, I would go to the hotel and help her clean and get done with her work. Or if she was doing someone's house, I'd go and I'd help. And she worked so hard. And I'm looking at her, and I remember in third grade saying, Mom, why don't you go to Hawkeye? It was Hawkeye Tech at that time.
Yeah.
Why don't you go to Hawkeye Tech? And there's so many other things that you could do. And she'd be like, oh no, I'm not smart enough. She was so smart, but it was just, that was what was ingrained into her mind, that she just wasn't smart enough or good enough.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand that when I was little. It took me, becoming an adult to understand how all of that impacted her so much that she lived out the limiting beliefs that other people imposed on her.
That's so.
And so, a lot of times when I think about and I say, man, as a little girl, I was so focused because I knew the stories of my family. I knew from their account firsthand the things they went to. How did my family get here and why? So some of my grandfather's sisters and brothers had already moved to Waterloo or Chicago, kind of traveling up along the railroad. And so they settled here, they settled Chicago. And my grandfather, we laugh because my grandmother would always say that was one of the laziest men ever. And she'd say, he'd get underneath the bed not to have to swat the flies off himself. And so, but he was also a very big man, like of big stature, very strong. And the stories that I'm like, oh yeah, these are just tales here, until I independently hear them from other family members down the line. I'm like, oh, that was true. Like, if somebody, was changing oil in their car, he would hold the car up for them to change the oil. Like, that's just what he did.
For real.
For real.
And in those days,
they
cars
weren't the
were
little
not
flimsy
lightweight
cars.
little Prius cars like I
Right.
got in my
They were
driveway.
not. They were not.
What? For
Right.
real?
For real. That's what I said. So
Wow.
when one of his brothers was telling me about this after I've grown up hearing the stories,
Yeah.
and the brother lived in Mississippi and he was here and we were driving and he was telling me about it. I'm like, what? That was real? And so, yeah, that was real. And, the mule isn't doing what the mule needs to do for him. And so, like, he, punched the mule and knock it out. And it's like, those were real stories.
Wow.
So also like that big of stature. And I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of crazy. Come on now.
Yeah.
Somebody who's going to punch a mule and knock it out. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's reminding me of a story previously, but we'll talk about that later. Someone else I know has done some
my
pretty
friend.
extraordinary
My
things
friend.
with her great strength.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, yeah.
So, the plantation owners.
Well, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so going back to when your grandmother and your mom,
Mhm.
well, so when your grandmother was in 6th grade
Yeah.
ish is when she couldn't go to school anymore.
Yep.
But you mentioned that her family would watch. She had a TV then? There was no
No.
TV then.
No.
Right.
No.
It was later when
was
your
later after
mom
my
was
mom
little.
was- yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So then you were talking about how that could be, it was exciting because there was hope,
Yeah.
but also scary. Were there any stories around that? Because I'm in my mind, I'm also thinking, relating it to some topics or some social things now
Yeah.
that, you need to be careful. People have to be careful in letting anybody know kind of what they really think.
Yeah.
So like, were there any stories around that where they got in trouble for listening to the radio, or they had to be careful of who knew what they were thinking? You know what I mean?
So I'd say for some, absolutely there were, there was that.
Mm-hmm.
But because my grandfather was like known to be this big, strong man who wasn't taking anything even off of the mule, there was a little fear
Okay.
of him.
Okay.
And he also had a gun. And so they thought he was crazy. When I say they, the plantation owners, they thought he was kind of crazy. And so he was told, and I tell the story of my grandmother talking about him being lazy, because I guess there was one day, they've had a long day in the field and he's sitting underneath a tree and the plantation owner comes through and he's like, boy, get up on the back of that truck and shuck that cotton. And my grandfather says to him, if you want that cotton shucked, you'll get up there and shuck it yourself.
Oh.
That was not the thing to say. So, but it was for him. He's like, I'm a grown man, just like you are.
Yeah.
And so he was then like the target. You've got the Ku Klux Klan and you've got all of that, all of the things that you see on TV. This is what they live.
Real.
And so they, they know they can't get him up to the grocery store because my grandfather had already said, if you think you're going to take me to that grocery store.
Because why? He would be vulnerable then?
In the grocery stores where the plantation owner and his sons would beat black men.
Okay.
So they'd take them in the back room and beat them. Okay. And my grandfather's like, I'm a grown man. If you think you're going to beat me, all of us will be dead. Like that was his attitude. Like, I'm not going.
Mm-hmm.
And so they, plotted that they were gonna kill him. And so they were like at night, they started like driving around the house. My grandfather is, keeping watch with his gun. And it's like, if I'm going down, you guys, some of you are too. And it got to the point where like they'd gone to my grandmother, like, you need to get those guns from him. He's dangerous. She's like, you must be crazy.
Yeah.
He's protecting all of us.
Yeah.
And it just got to a point where she's like, my grandfather called him C. She's like, C, it's time to go. Either they're going to kill you or you're going to kill them.
To come here to move. So your mom grew up in that environment, just scared to death lots of times. And
I would guess,
Does she talk to you about a lot of that or not?
She doesn't talk to me so much about being scared. I'd say I don't think and maybe she was. My grandmother, I say, was probably more scared than any. But I don't think we're, as a family, I don't think that's really much of a thing. You know what I mean?
Well, yes. And then I like that leads me to more questions because somewhere along the line. So, okay. And then relating that to what Martin Luther King shared and did and emulated. All right. And now the title of, this and your keynote, it leads me to believe that there were, though that mindset was also instilled in you. So thinking about your grandmother, like as a mom, as a mom to have that happen, and then no, you have to be like, so you're keeping the peace. So my example would certainly not be being fear of my life, but it would be keeping the peace maybe in the house, and how moms do that. We're going to just make sure our kids are protected. They're going to see me be positive. They're going to see me not be afraid. They're going to see me all these things.
So there were still 6 kids in the house. So my mom and her 2 sisters, and then the 3 youngest boys were still, they were still at home during that time. And so, it was, and the youngest at that time would have been 8 or 9. My Uncle Lee was the baby. So, there was a lot going on. And so that was the decision, my grandmother saying pretty much enough is enough. Somebody's going to end up dead. And so we already had family that was up north. And so the decision was made to move the family up north, and that's how they got here.
And that's no chump change thing either. Like that's like I'm moving my family or leaving the jobs that we have.
The jobs of everybody working in the cornfield.
I know that sucked and all that. Except and in my mind though, I'm thinking, and it was also the only income that they had.
Right.
And they're going to take this giant family and just go.
Yeah,
so it's a big deal.
So one of the really great things is family.
Yeah.
Family's so good.
Yeah.
So when they came up north, 2 of my uncles were already here. One would have been 23, my uncle Dick, who's still alive as well. And then my Uncle Lacey, he would have been maybe 25 or 6 at the time. So they had moved up a few years before. And then my grandfather had other siblings who were here. And so my mom stayed with her Aunt Rosalie, and my uncles, they were still in junior high. They stayed with my Uncle Sugar Daddy and Aunt Bobby. People are staying with different relatives until my grandparents can get a house, get their own place. Yeah. And, my grandfather ended up, getting a job, and
where at?
Was it Hawkeye Steel at the time? And so, I think about those times. So you've got 1965,
right,
when they moved up here. So that would have been 60 years ago now. And it was just such a different time. But I think about all of the challenges that they had. They didn't have, they barely had enough. It was always just enough, when we think about sharecropping, it was just another.
I don't even know what that is.
So sharecropping,
you know what I mean? Like, let's talk about that.
It was basically a elevated form of slavery.
Well, I was going to say super not.
No. So you live and you work on these plantations.
Yeah.
And whatever is harvested for the year, the profits are supposed to be shared between the workers and the owners. Well, the owners each year come and say, oh, we didn't make a profit this year, so you owe us.
Oh.
You go in the hole as one of the workers. You never get ahead. There's never enough. We know that there was always more than enough. There was so much wealth that was generated from cotton in this country.
Yeah.
But there was never enough when it came to,
and they knew this the whole time.
Of course.
But they were not able to do anything about it.
you're not the owner.
Right.
Yeah.
Did they have a hard time leaving? Were they given a hard time when they did leave to come here?
I truly believe that they were glad they were gone.
Because he was kind of a problem.
And when you have someone who is not afraid,
yeah,
that can cause trouble for the other people. You get one person who's willing to stand up.
Yeah, do a little disrupting.
And do some disrupting.
That's right.
That is a problem. So, like, I'm probably like,
yeah,
thank you.
I see that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think about the education and where did it become ingrained in my grandmother that we got to buy a house.
Mm-hmm.
How do you buy a house and you have nothing? But they did, and that was something that was instilled in all of her kids. I'd say, I think all of the grandkids that I can think of. There may be someone, I don't know. Everybody owns their own home, and from an early age, it's not, it was just part of, that's just what you do.
Mm-hmm.
You are an owner. You are, so where that came from in her, and like I say, not discounting my grandfather at all, but my grandmother was the brains of the family.
Mm-hmm.
And so much wisdom and knowledge, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for just how she babysat all of us cousins.
Yeah.
So even though I grew up an only child,
you said that you had all of that love in that
all
family.
of these cousins that were always around, and you always had people to play with, and that you just grew up with them like your siblings almost. And my grandmother just always being there. We never went to daycare.
Yeah.
We never had, I don't think I ever had anyone who was not a family member that kept me.
Mm-hmm.
It was always someone in the family. My uncles, they babysat my grandmother, but it was always family. And, as I got older and was able to do so many more things than even were on my own radar. Like, none of the things that I've done, to be perfectly honest, have been on my radar.
I know, that's the coolest thing.
They really have.
Yeah.
And I know it was one time, my mom and I was getting some award in DC, and I taking my mom with me. And as we are, walking the halls of Congress, and we're meeting with the congressman, and they know, who I am, and they're engaging with my mom.
Yeah.
And, you've just got all the people that my mom she was so overwhelmed, and it just delighted my heart.
Yeah.
Because she's like, I never would have thought that I would be here. And that brings tears to my eyes,
Yes.
That brings tears to my eyes, because it's like, she's like, when we were in those cotton fields, I would have never thought that I would be here, So even as this is achieving the dream against all odds, that right there, something that she never dreamt would be, that she would be meeting and talking to, the presidential candidate who's stopping in my store and saying, like, hey, we've been watching your daughter. She's been doing some really great things. You must have did a really great job. And she's like, what? What?
Yes.
I'm not looking for totally unexpected occurrences in my own life.
Yeah.
But more than it, for me, it has nothing to do with me. It's how much joy and delight I get from her being able to have these experiences and watch these things go on, and just, just kind of think and say, never would have thought.
Yeah.
So.
And the gratitude, like, in her heart, like the overwhelming, like, yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
It is really amazing. And just like, the way I always say, she never has pressured me to do anything.
Well, that's where I was going to go with that next, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So, like, because you said, your mom didn't go to school outside of what she was able to go to school for, right? How long did she go to school?
She did graduate, but it was still, segregation time. And so they went to school, October, November until March, April. And then they're back in the cotton fields. So they never got a full year of school.
Right. Was she graduated when they moved here?
Yeah, she had just graduated. So they did their schooling. They had like pre-primer and post-primer, and then it was all these other things before first grade. So they started a little, like first grade would have been a little later. So she graduated at either 19 or 20. I can't remember. It was 19 or 20.
Okay.
Because they had like these 2 extra. So it would have been 20.
Okay.
So it was right after graduation.
And then she would have been, if I'm doing my math correctly, she would have been like 30 when you were born or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay. So she would have been like 30. And then your life, your mom worked doing really hard work. Cleaning and stuff. So in that part of her life, there wasn't school. So I know how intelligent you are and the work that you've done. So I know I want to hear about it again. And I know our audience would be blessed to hear. Oh, that's so emotional for me. So all those things as you're talking and you're giving, just explaining to us and sharing with us the feelings. And I can just feel it, that what your mom, seeing these amazing things that she knows you've worked for, but it's also she has all these other experiences, which gives her this perspective of holy moly, like what, our family was here and she saw her mom do her thing and lazy. See, I'm sure he wasn't lazy. He's just doing his thing and she's doing her thing. And they did their freaking thing.
Me, my grandfather was a lazy.
Well, you know what I mean? But still, I'm messing with even if I know. Like, I know what you're saying totally. Yeah. And she did probably 90% off like all other things. But they did their thing.
They did.
And their thing got y'all here.
It did, right?
And then your mom watches all that and her own suffering and her own determination and courage and then to see that next generation, which was you and is you, take that to the next level.
I see it as a responsibility.
Yeah.
It's a responsibility.
Okay. That's where I was going.
Yeah.
So at what age did you feel like, okay, this is my responsibility? Or like if you shared, like you felt this thing in you that you were determined, you had a determination about you since you were very young.
Yeah, I did. I heard the stories and they were so fresh. When I'm hearing them, they are so fresh. They were not that far removed from those days when they came here. And so as a little girl watching, various movies and shows that depicted things from the South, and for my mom to be able to, just relate from personal experiences to, that's how it was. And then to go into stories, and it always struck me how much people suffered, how much Black families, individuals suffered so that we could have the right for equal education, so that we could have the right to vote. Because even though women were given the right to vote in the 1920s, I mean, blacks, it took, no, not Black women, not Black men, it was 1960s before we could vote, it was so fresh for them. And so even, there were still things, even though it was the North, there are things that aren't talked about, like the riots that happened here in the 1960s, in Waterloo.
Tell me.
And the National Guard being brought in. My uncles were in junior high and high school at the time. And so there were just things that were going on in the Waterloo, Cedar Falls area, and the younger, my mom my mom and uncle's generation, they were tired of it, and so there was a lumber yard down 4th Street in Waterloo near the railroad tracks, and that was set fire, and like I said, National Guards brought in, and
Really?
there was still a lot, even though schools were not segregated, there was still some segregation going on.
Oh yeah,
Because
and part of your story, right?
So even during my elementary years, I was always very focused on because my mom, I saw her always feeling like, if like white people were smarter. And I'm like, no, God made us all to be smart. Like he made us all equal. And that was so ingrained in me.
Do you think that was from your grandmother?
It might have been. It came from somewhere.
Yeah.
But he did not make me to be less than.
Yes.
And just seeing, like, it just put just a fire in me. And so I worked really, really hard. My mom, like I said, she loved reading her newspaper. And so when I was little, I wanted to learn to read. And so I remember still, by the time I'm in Head Start, you're 4 years old, like I am reading some words, and I'm not like reading proficiently through the newspaper, but I could read, as it was just, I wanted, from that little girl, wanted not to be less than.
Yeah.
And so when I got to 1st grade, I still remember they would separate us by how well we were doing in reading and math. So you had your A group, your B group, your C group. And I was always in the A group. And they had the talented and gifted program. And so as the A group, is sitting around the table, and we're taking our time going through where we're at in our books. And, we would have the tag teacher, the talented and gifted teacher, come in and take those who were considered to be talented and gifted out to do whatever their special learning was. Right. And that meant that everyone sitting around the table with me being the only Black student around that table, was gone.
And you didn't get to go?
I was not, no. So
And there's no segregation.
Exactly. I could see that, a ball of fire as a 6-7-year-old, what was going on. Well, and it actually put more fire in my belly to do better. Yeah. I remember at one point, I'm actually moving at just as fast of a pace, if not ahead, and I'm putting into B group. This was, I can't remember if it was the 1st grade or 3rd grade, one of them. I was put into B group, and so what I found was that it was almost like I was being slowed down, but I would not allow that. So I don't care that you are trying to slow me down. I'm going to finish this book. Mm-hmm. And I would sit at my desk, and I would just go through, and I would finish it, and I'd turn it in. So you may have me sitting at that table, but that doesn't mean that you are going to restrict what I can learn. Like at that age, I'm like, my learning is going to be because I'm learning, not because someone else is controlling what I'm able to learn or what I'm not able to learn. And so I don't care where you put me. I'm still going to show up as this same person, determined not to be less than. Yeah. And so it was my 8th grade year when the tag teacher, and I think at that time it maybe transferred to ELP, the expanded learning program, same thing. Yeah. It was one of my teachers had me talk to the tag ELP teacher, and she put me into the ELP in junior high in 8th grade. So 8th grade through 12th grade, I was always there. But when you think about it, if I were not accelerated or talented and gifted, my first, kindergarten through seventh grade,
all of a sudden you just
all of a sudden
got there.
like, come on,
Yeah.
But all of that, the more I feel that there's a push to push me down or to make me feel like I'm less than, the more strength that gives me to power forward. And that's something though that I think everybody needs to have.
Yes.
I want everybody to have that.
Yeah.
Because people can say some things and do some things that can really tear us down if we let them.
Yeah.
If we let them, it becomes our choice. I cannot control how somebody may feel about me for whatever reason or whatever the relationship is that we have. I can't control that. All I can control is my emotions, my attitude, and how I show up in the world. And so that's what my focus is. Like, man, they're trying to shut me down. Thank you for that extra motivation.
Yes.
How do I now climb?
Yep.
So,
and remembering, like, I feel like I hear that so much in your messaging all the time, is to remember who we are. Like,
who we are. God created us all.
All this will knock us down, but that's the family. That's the core. And knowing that, that we have value no matter what is happening around us, that we are valuable.
We are valuable. God created us. I hear sometimes, something that I never would as a child and as an adult will never do, like, is to talk about people or say, oh my gosh, they're ugly. And it really, like, something like scratches my insides when I hear other people be like, ooh, they're ugly or what. And it's like, we were all created in God's image. I don't care what you look like on the outside. God created us all in his image. And so whatever that you're looking at in a person, God created that. Now, on our inside, what we cultivate, now that might be ugly within a person, but that has nothing to do with our physical being. I just think people should just really know who you are.
Well, and you're such a great example of that. And so is Martin Luther King.
And that's what I was saying. I was going to say, like, Martin Luther King knew who he was and that was his message.
That was his message. I love using him as an example in my work too, just because he never shied away from talking about where his power came from. He was, like you said, like the most amazing marketing ever with no tools, people coming together. But like that was never anything he shied away from, and it was his message. It was that you are who you are because God says that's who you are. And because of that, we are all connected. The color of our skin, where we're from,
it's the content
all that
of our
stuff.
character.
And it wasn't just about if you were black or brown or whatever. His message was just so phenomenal. And I just think that for me has been such an amazing thing to stand on the shoulders of. He's never afraid to talk about where his power came from. And I think it's too bad that those of us that are in leadership, which is why we're here, like honestly, why we wanted to have this podcast, a big part of it was we felt that responsibility of, we've been not gifted. We have a lot of blessings in our life. And I don't ever want to not give glory to where glory comes from, like let's not be afraid to talk about God in our everyday life. And, you can be from whatever religion or wherever you're from or what, it doesn't matter. But anyway, he was just so not afraid to talk about that. And I have such great admiration for you and respect for you and your work. Thank you. I love hearing this story because it shows that, we are standing on the shoulders of those of us that have gone before us and done the work. And it is our responsibility to continue to do the work.
It is. It is. Next generation should not have to start where we started. We should always put them steps ahead. And, leaving a legacy.
And through this lens of love that you've also been such an incredible person to walk the walk,
Thank you.
I mean, right? I know. Thank you. So good. And then also, let me go back to bringing you back to high school. You shared a story with me that I thought was really, really incredible, and I think it's for all children to hear, and it's so amazing. But you were very determined. So
Yeah.
your mom reading the newspaper, you would see something all the time. Can you pick up that story?
Yeah, so when she would be reading the newspaper, and especially the Sunday paper, I love the Sunday paper.
I know. I don't have it anymore. Do you?
Yeah, we still get the paper.
That would be fun to do,
Yeah,
to have.
yeah,
Yeah.
we still get the paper. It doesn't come on Sunday anymore, though. It comes on Saturday.
Oh,
But
okay.
anyway, so I would, every year at the end of the school year, I would be looking for the edition that would come out, and it would show the top 5 students from every school, not 5%, but number 1 through 5 in their class. And every year I would look for a face that looked like mine. And I never saw that face. And I remember being 7th grade going into 8th grade, and my cousins, who were more like sisters to me, were graduating high school, and I saw the kids with the medals around their neck, and I was like, I want one of those.
Yeah.
So figured out, okay, you got to be in the top 10% of your class to get that. And I also if I want someone else, hopefully, to be that brown face in the newspaper before I get there. But if it's not, I want to be that brown face, because there's probably somebody else who's looking for that brown face.
And you had that thought in your mind
yes. Well, I was, yes. That's why I said as a little girl, like, who was she?
then. Yeah. Oh, it's evident who she was. She's
I don't know,
definitely
I'm like, oh man, bring her
alive
back.
and kicking.
Bring her back. She's so in high school, I still remember my first day. I remember what I was wearing, and I remember the mindset that I went in with. And I had my sights set on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wherever you're at in there, you gotta be there.
Okay.
And my closest friends were those in that top 5, 6, 7.
That makes sense, right?
So yeah. And in the guidance office, though, you could actually go and see where people were ranking.
Oh.
So I actually was keeping track of where I was at. Was I in the top 5?
Keeping track of those metrics.
I was keeping track, right? I am keeping track.
Yeah.
And so I remember going, and there was one point I was number 6. And like one of my really good friends, I'm not going to name her, but I was secretly competitive, very secretly competitive. Obviously I was, because I'm going to the guidance office to see where things are ranking,
it's so
right?
hilarious.
And so I'm like, man, senior year, I love her, but I got to knock her out of that number 5.
Oh my God. Let's name her. Who is she?
Name her. I can't. But if she's watching, she knows who she is, because she was number 6.
Okay. Oh
yeah, so that
You're
was
ruthless, really.
Oh my gosh.
Right underneath there.
It was I had strategy to get there was a strategy to get
amazing.
there.
Yeah.
And and the funny thing was, it was 2 students who gotten all A's, and there were 3 of us who got 1B.
Dang.
So yeah, so that was like throughout all high school.
And that's 5.
So that's 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the same exact GPA, not GPAs, or it's just the top of the class for that senior year. Or no, because it was GPA then, probably, right?
Your GPA. Yeah. It would have been
Okay.
GPA. Yeah.
Wow.
So I was just really excited, hoping that was giving hope to someone else, to say, well, shoot, if she could do it.
So you got in the paper.
Yeah, and it wasn't about me being in the paper. You know what I mean? It wasn't about me.
But that's how they would see it.
That's
how anyone would see it.
That's how anyone would see it.
Yeah.
But there was a purpose behind it. It was a messaging behind it, that we are as smart.
Yeah.
And we are as good. There was just a thing of like Black students in general not being quite as smart. And it's like, but we are.
Yeah.
And you can't argue with the numbers, so put down the numbers.
Yeah.
And so that was it. It wasn't about, oh, give me accolades. It wasn't about that at all. I could care less about that stuff. And you know that about me.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I
I
generally
don't
try and shy away from it.
Yeah,
but
you
it's
do.
like,
I don't know half of the stuff that accolades that you've received because you don't talk about it.
I
like
don't.
even when I was interviewing, I'm learning like, what? Wait, what?
Yeah.
You did what?
Yeah.
Oh
So,
my gosh, it's crazy.
So yeah, but it's usually just about, if I can do it, then I want somebody else to look and say, well, shucks, if she can do it, I can too. And, you know, whether it be a black male, a black female, a white female, anyone, a Hispanic, it doesn't matter. I think all of us sometimes have these limiting beliefs about ourselves and our abilities. And I'm not saying that I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that at all.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other areas where other people can encourage me to, you know, oh, you really can do this.
Yeah.
And so I hope that I can encourage others in areas that, you know, God has just blessed me to, you know, to be able to do well in, to give hope to somebody else.
And you obviously have. And I think you just said, where's that little girl? Well, obviously that little girl just became more amazing as you've gotten older because the things that you're doing now are all the same kinds of things. When you think about, you know, the courage that it takes to make a dream come true, what would you what would be a messaging that you would want to say to our audience? And honoring, like, what's the thing for Martin Luther King's life that maybe stands out for you the most? And then how would you pay that forward to other people?
Yeah. Great question. Thank you. So I always think we all only live once in this life. We get this life to live. We all need to just remember we're here for a purpose. Yeah. And I don't want to get to that day where I'm breathing my last breath and I have regrets thinking, man, I should have. What would have happened if I would have? Like, just live life full out. There are very few things that we do that are going to literally kill us. And if it is going to literally kill you, you probably should not be doing it.
You know? Probably no.
You know, you or us or someone else. You shouldn't be doing it. But like literally for the most part, what is the fear? What are we living in fear of? Is it fear of failure? And how do you define failure? You know, because for me, failure is not taking that shot. Whether it works or not, I've taken a lot of shots that, yep, that one missed the basket, but I'm still here. Mm-hmm. I'm still here.
Yeah.
So, you know, just don't live life in fear.
And through that adversity, and instead you can turn that around and be more determined. Absolutely. And to remember who you are. And
remember who you are. Yeah. Like who God created you to be.
Is that what you would say? Like, is that what you would say? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but for...
Absolutely. Because I say that all the time.
Yeah.
Like, who did God create you to be?
Yeah. It's
not about your gender. It's not about your skin color. It is truly about the content of your character and how you show up in this world. Yeah. My life is not all about me. And neither should the next person's. It should be about all, you know, benefiting and helping all.
Thank you. That is what you have done for me, our relationship.
And you for me. Yeah.
It's been pretty remarkable, I feel like, our journey. And I've learned so much from you and what it means to be connected, what it means to continue on and through adversity and to love and see people through a lens of love and the determination. And, you know, you don't quit. You don't quit. You are not a quitter. And I'm not either, but you you inspire me.
Oh,
and
my gosh,
I'll start crying now at the end of this, but I'm just grateful. And thank you so much for sharing that. And I have, you know, thank you to your mom, who I know and is a beautiful, beautiful human being. And I feel like I now know a little bit more about you, and I appreciate you sharing that. And in honor of, I can't think of a better way to honor Martin Luther King today.
Yeah.
You are a great person to do it.
Oh gosh, thank you. And just thank you for this episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, I love you.
Oh, I love you too. Yeah.
And we love you.
Yes, we do.
And
We
thank you
love
very
you.
much for being with us. I am Angie Gray.
And I am ReShonda Young.
And we
are
are Sister Friends. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Wow, that was good, ReShonda. You did amazing.
Oh, thank you. Oh, you're such an amazing friend. Oh my gosh. You you've got all the tears coming from me today. Oh my goodness. Thanks for tuning in to Sister Friends. We hope these conversations help you see things from a new angle, feel a little more connected, and maybe even laugh along the way.
Remember, whether it's family, work, or those elephants in the room we all deal with, everything really is about relationships.
If you enjoyed this episode, let us know. Share your thoughts, share this podcast with a friend, and let's keep building those connections.
Until next time, stay connected, stay curious, and let's keep growing
Together.